How's it going, everybody? Sean Ross here, and I am ready to dive into the latest chapter from My Hero Academia 161, entitled A Bright Future. Now, this is coming out on the normal day that this chapter would have come out, but MHA decided to come out a day early and on Thanksgiving, no less. So yesterday was Thanksgiving. I was actually away from home, spending time with family and getting to eat a lot of delicious food that everyone just consumes on Thanksgiving, and I definitely gained some weight with the Thanksgiving dinner. So hopefully to all of you guys that celebrate Thanksgiving, hopefully you guys had a wonderful time, got to spend time with friends, family, or just getting to eat all that delicious food. But we were also blessed and kind of saddened having the latest chapter of MHA come out on Thanksgiving, because all of us were probably definitely ecstatic with the fact that this chapter came out early, but with the content we got, it definitely brought the mood down a bit for a day of giving thanks, because this chapter delivered upon us the first character death. At least I'm presuming this is the first character death that we are seeing within My Hero Academia, because to my knowledge, I don't remember from chapter 1 up until now that we've actually seen on panel within the manga a character actually dying or passing away. This is not counting like All Might's mentor, anyone that's been mentioned to have already passed, and I think this is the first character. So by the ending of chapter 161, we see the passing of Sir Nighteye. And this is a very emotional moment. Within the last pages of this chapter, we have All Might, Deku, and Mirio basically by his bedside as he's basically giving his final farewells and basically tying up all of these grudges or everything with All Might, talking with Deku, and then like that emotional moment saying goodbye to his most trusted, and the way he just looked up to Mirio as his like valuable student. It was such a good moment, but I'm really saddened just to have this character, you know, leaving the story, passing away, because I would have really liked to see more from Nighteye with the story moving forward. But there's a lot to dive into. It's definitely with that last section when he's talking about energy, you know, changing the future. So I definitely have a few thoughts on that. But this chapter in particular is basically to set up the aftermath from the previous arc that we've been on, you know, with rescuing Eri from Overhaul. Because last chapter we got to basically tie up all the loose ends that we kind of had with our villains last chapter, with our League of Villains coming in and disarming Overhaul. But this chapter is basically to show us all the injuries, every hero that's going to the hospital, to make sure who's okay and who's not, and basically to show us what's going on after the fact of rescuing Eri, which I actually really like. And I'm wondering if the next chapter will continue off with that, just having a little bit more aftermath from building off of the end of this arc and transitioning into the new arc, because I'm really excited to see what the next arc we are about to go on. But let's just talk about the aftermath within this chapter, and then just talk about all of our heroes at the hospital, and then just dive a little bit more into the Sir Nighteye, All Might, Deku, and Mirio conversation. So the very beginning of this chapter, we begin to dive into a little bit more of the aftermath that went down after the climactic battle between Deku and Overhaul, and we see a lot of new heroes coming in to just survey the overall situation. And we even have Najiri, who is drawn very well by Horikoshi in this first page. I just love the way that she looks, and even like that last panel of her, the very big panel at the bottom of page 1, I really do like how that was drawn. But she is just basically surveying the overall property damage. We see the giant gaping hole where Deku and Overhaul popped up to the surface and continued their overall fight. But the news that we actually learn about the property damage and the casualties is actually very good news, because there are no civilians that ended up dying. At least 3 civilians were just a little bit injured, but nothing too major, and there's property damage here and there. But what I love about this section is that it emphasizes just how smart and strategic Deku was during his fight with Overhaul, because he realized with Overhaul's new monstrous form, with all of these houses and civilians surrounding them, he needed to get Overhaul out of this area as quickly as possible. So what he ended up doing was launching Overhaul into the air around the area with the giant gaping hole to reduce the property damage, but also try to take out Overhaul as quickly as possible, so that way no civilians would end up dying or getting severely injured during his fight in taking down Overhaul. And I do really like that Horikoshi decided to actually add that in, because it just emphasizes once again how smart Deku is and how quick thinking he is during his fight with Overhaul, that he was able to minimize the amount of property damage and civilian casualties. Just goes to show how good Deku will be once he ends up becoming a pro hero. And I just absolutely love that section. Najiri, like I mentioned, is just drawn so well. She's even got some good moments in this first page. But once we actually move away from just kind of like the status report we got from the battlegrounds, we move right into the hospital just to see see how all of our pro heroes are healing up and how bad or serious their injuries actually are. And what I love about this beginning hospital section is that we just breeze through all of our character updates, basically seeing what injuries they sustained from this arc and how a majority of them are going to make a full recovery. And Horikoshi kind of just gives us this quick update. That way a majority of this chapter can be dedicated to the emotional moments where Sir Nighteye is about to say goodbye to All Might, Deku, and Mirio. So just to breeze through all of our character updates, their injuries, and how they're going to make a full recovery, Deku is basically having a full bill of health. His physicals came back. He's looking pretty good, but the doctor still points out that his arms are still pretty messed up, which we already knew, and I'm wondering if he actually sustained anything new to his arms that are going to damage them even further with him going through that whole process with Eri during his fight with Overhaul. But moving on from that, Aizawa got off light with this arc, only actually getting 10 stitches, so he actually got off pretty easy. Kirishima is wrapped up like a mummy. I love the way he is drawn in that panel, but it's because all of the bruising and lacerations that he received from his fight. That's why he had to be wrapped up so tight in all those bandages, and him just saying, "I'm a mummy." I love that section right there. Sun Eater actually has like this gash or fissure wound on his face, but he's going to make a full recovery and the scar is not going to be noticeable, so that is good for Sun Eater. And Fat Gum only has some bone fractures and he is just hungry. He wants to regain all of his fat, that we can just be that like chubby, lovable figure that we've seen at the beginning of this arc. And of course, Rocklock had no serious injuries and you see his wife and child visiting him at the hospital. I gotta laugh at that child's face because it is drawn just so hilariously. Just the look on that child's face, and not even that. That child looks exactly like Rocklock. It's like a mini-me clone was just made of Rocklock and was just put on the face of a baby. That right there, that panel made me laugh just looking at that baby's face. But just to rewind just a little bit back to Deku, I wanted to ask this question about the scar slash bruising on the upper portion of his arm, because I never noticed him having that scar, you know, previously before this arc. Maybe I just didn't realize it, but did he actually get that from a previous fight in a past arc, or is this something that he just got with this current arc and when he was going through that whole transformation, just going through Eri's power? Like, definitely leave that down in the comments if he's actually had that before, or did he actually obtain that scar slash bruise on his upper arm in this current arc? But speaking of rewinding, Eri actually appears in this week's chapter. However, things are not looking too good right now for her character. She is still suffering from that fever she got when her power went out of control, and she is being held currently within the quarantine bay of the hospital. As it currently stands, the hospital and our pro heroes don't really know what to do with Eri and her quirk, because right now her quirk is very volatile to everyone around her, to the people working at the hospital, but then also the pro heroes, because Aizawa brings up some pretty good points about how hard it is going to be to train Eri to use her quirk, because as we kind of know right now, Eri is unable to control her quirk, and her quirk is actually very special and hard to train because it only works on people. It doesn't work on buildings, it doesn't work on the ground, it only works on people. So you got to start asking the question, that type of quirk is going to be very hard to train and get under your control. So that right there basically raises the question about what is going to be the future for Eri's character. Can she ever become a pro hero? Can she ever learn to control her quirk? These are the questions right now that the aftermath of this arc is going to bring to the table for Eri's character. And I'm very curious to actually find out what we're going to see with Eri's character moving forward in My Hero Academia. But as it kind of stands right now, nobody around her really knows how they're going to help her get her quirk under control. And honestly, I'm just hoping for the best because I love Eri's character. I love her design. She's cute and I'm glad she's safe, but I really do hope that people around her end up coming up with a way for her to learn how to train and hone her quirk. But after Eri's section, this is when the rest of the chapter is just dedicated to this emotional moments with Sir Nighteye, and it basically allows us to basically say our final goodbyes to this character right here. And I love the fact that before Deku is able to go in to go see Sir Nighteye, we see Recovery Girl and All Might arriving at the hospital, because I'm really glad that Horikoshi actually brought Recovery Girl into this, because it even allows us to see that even the powers that Recovery Girl has, she is unable to heal Sir Nighteye. So this is just making his death that much more finite by the ending of this chapter. But having All Might actually come to the hospital and having that that emotional conversation take place with not only All Might and Deku, but also Mirio as well. And just getting to see Sir Nighteye in that hospital bed with all the tubes basically going into his stomach, and even actually getting the confirmation that his left arm was actually cut off, which I noticed 2 chapters back as he was kind of getting wheeled away into the ambulance. I was like, wait a minute, is Sir Nighteye missing an arm? And is confirmed in this chapter that he was. But right here, I actually want to talk about the piece of dialogue where Sir Nighteye was talking with Deku and All Might about the future, how the future can actually be changed, because as we've kind of seen previously, Sir Nighteye has been stuck in this notion that the future is finite, it is set in stone, and it cannot be changed. But as we can kind of see with the ending of this current arc with them rescuing Eri, Deku was able to change the future. And this actually changed Sir Night-Eye's perspective as he is approaching death's door. And I like this section because at first, I didn't quite understand what they were actually going for, like why Horikoshi was putting this in there. What did he actually mean by this energy being like enveloped by Deku as he was carrying the will of everybody? But reading this a few more times, I actually come to understand it, because Sir Night-Eye's character is based off of the stern Japanese man. You know, they're fixed in their ways and they're basically very cynical. And the way Sir Night-Eye kind of views the future, it's impossible to change. And there's that doubt in his mind that he's always had, you know, searching for All Might's cure, making sure that All Might can stay alive. He's been pursuing it, but in the back of his mind, there was that doubt that this is impossible. I cannot change the future. But in comes Deku, this person that is just basically willing to throw everything away. His conviction is so strong. And hearing that him, you know, in the fight with Overhaul, Deku and Sir Night-Eye were going to die, Deku threw that aside. He had no doubts in his mind. He's like, I'm going to push forward and I'm going to twist the future. That right there, Deku had no doubts in his mind as he was fighting Overhaul in that moment. And because he had no doubt, that energy, that positiveness was just flowing through him and was able to change the future. And this actually shined a light on Sir Night-Eye, basically saying, when you don't have any doubts and you are convicted, you are basically like moving forward with all this drive and conviction, you can do anything. You can even change the future. And I do really like that that little section right there was able to change not only Sir Night-Eye on his deathbed, but just getting to see him smile by the ending and him coming to peace with everything. And of course, I have to talk about Mirio basically saying his goodbyes to Sir Night-Eye, because this is the sad emotional moment right now for chapter 161. This whole moment with just Mirio coming in as he's dragging the nurse behind him as this nurse is trying to stop him from moving. And he's basically yelling, or at least crying to Sir Night-Eye, basically saying, don't leave us just yet. You are my teacher. I need you to teach me so much more. It's such an emotional moment, but I love the inner monologue from Sir Night-Eye as he's about to touch Mirio on his face, where he says this exact quote right here. At first, I only took you on because I thought you were a fitting vessel, but you held such admiration for me and believed in me, and before I knew it, you became my most treasured student. Mirio, you are becoming an outstanding hero. And at that moment, his eye almost goes like Kaneki's in Tokyo Ghoul, where it kind of just goes all black. And I'm kind of reading this as he's reading the future right now of Mirio. And he's basically saying, like, this future, we should not change. And I love this moment. He ends up, you know, passing away very slowly in the hospital bed, keeps a smile on his face and goes, we should all just keep smiling. Society needs to smile, laugh, and be full of energy, and to bring about a brighter future. Title drop right there, but that dialogue right there from Sir Night-Eye is so powerful, and getting to see not only Deku and Mirio cry, but All Might as well. I don't think we've ever seen All Might really cry in the series, but seeing All Might actually cry, it gotta touch you right there. And this right here, this death, this first character death within My Hero Academia is going to affect these 3 characters significantly. All Might, Deku, and Mirio. I'm really curious how this is actually going to affect Deku moving forward, but also Mirio as well, because we don't really know what the future holds for Mirio's character right now. Is he going to be quirkless for forever? Like, is he never going to get his quirk back? Will he end up getting the serum to actually bring his quirk back? Is he going to work for the police? There's so many questions right now I have for Mirio's character. I'm very curious, but just having that last page with just, you know, the beeper silencing that face on Mirio where he's just looking down and crying, and we just have this fist of Sir Night-Eye, and it says, his day ends with a peaceful smile on his face. Good night, Night-Eye. that is a way to end a chapter right there. It was an emotional chapter, but I'm really glad the funny and upbeat moments were put at the beginning of this chapter, and then it just slowly kind of, but I'm really glad we had like the funny upbeat moments by the end. Wow. But I'm really glad we had the funny and upbeat moments at the beginning of this chapter, and we just slowly worked our way towards the emotional and sad parts of this chapter, and then just once again saying goodbye to Sir Nighteye. He sleeps now once more for forever, and this sucks that he's gone, but this is the very significant part of My Hero Academia. The first on-panel character death I believe we have seen for My Hero Academia. So that is my review, guys, for My Hero Academia chapter 161. I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts on this chapter. Were you guys reading this on Thanksgiving Day, you know, crying at the dinner table as you just were watching this character who we just got introduced to and have kind of grown accustomed to and just attachment to, just seeing him, you know, breathe his final breath and just close his eyes and just saying goodbye to his students? Like that right there, I can only imagine what you guys probably felt like on Thanksgiving Day. I actually read this the night on Thanksgiving, so it was definitely emotional, but I actually wasn't able to cry around everyone around me. I was actually alone, so that made it pretty good. So definitely leave your thoughts on this chapter down in the comments below. I love you guys so much, and we're moving forward next week with chapter 162 of My Hero Academia. But until then, and until the next chapter, I'll talk with you guys later. And remember, guys, first Sir Nighteye plus Ultra. See you later, guys.